Alright, let's get into this, because there's something happening in Las Vegas right now that I don't think enough people are paying attention to, and once you hear the details, I think you're going to feel the same way I do. I want to start with a number, 7. That's how many weeks it took for a rookie quarterback to make grown coaches inside that building start talking like something unusual is unfolding in front of them. Not promising, not intriguing, unusual. And when you've covered enough of these quarterback competitions to know the difference between polite praise and genuine surprise, you learn to perk up when the tone shifts that fast. So let's talk about Fernando Mendoza, because I don't think developing is even the right word for what he's doing right now. Developing is what you expect. Developing is the baseline. Every single rookie quarterback in the league is supposed to develop. That's not a story. That's a job description. What's actually happening with Mendoza is something else entirely. This is a guy closing a gap that wasn't supposed to close this quickly, and the people inside the Raiders building are the ones saying it out loud, not just media members trying to manufacture a storyline out of OTAs. And here's the thing that really got my attention. After mandatory minicamp wrapped, after the cameras were mostly gone and the easy storylines had already been written, Mendoza himself said something that I think was more revealing than he probably intended. He said he feels like he's leaps and bounds ahead of where he started. Now, normally I'd roll my eyes at that kind of quote. Rookies say optimistic things all the time. It's basically required, but this didn't feel like a manufactured soundbite handed to him before he walked up to the podium. It felt like a guy who's genuinely a little stunned by his own progress, almost like he's watching himself improve from the outside and trying to find the words for it. So let's rewind for a second, because to understand why this matters, you have to understand what this kid was walking into. For 3 years at Indiana, Mendoza barely ran a single meaningful snap from under center. His entire college career was built in the shotgun, spread out, eyes up, clean picture of the field before the ball even touched his hands. That's modern college football in a nutshell, and normally that wouldn't be some massive red flag, except Clint Kubiak's offense in Las Vegas isn't built that way. This system breezed through under center football, bootlegs, heavy play action, footwork that has to be exact on the very first step, or the whole concept collapses before it even starts. This was the single biggest swing factor in whether Mendoza was even going to be functional in this offense, let alone dangerous in it. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because quarterback transitions like this one have wrecked careers before. Talented passers, big arms, sharp minds, guys who looked like franchise cornerstones in college, and then they get thrown into a heavy under-center scheme, and the timing just never clicks. The vision changes, the depth of drop changes. The way a defense disguises coverage looks completely different when you're not standing 5 yards back with a wide-open view of everything in front of you. It's not a small adjustment. It's a different sport wearing the same uniform. So when the Raiders found out what they had on their hands, they didn't ease into it. They didn't wait for training camp to start fixing it. They went straight at the problem immediately, almost aggressively, like they understood the clock was already running. Walkthroughs at the team hotel night after night. 25 to 50 reps under center with the entire offensive line every single evening before practice even officially started the next morning. That's not how you treat a developmental afterthought. That's how you treat a top priority you're terrified of getting wrong. And the early returns? Loud. Coaches inside the building are already saying he's improved dramatically. Teammates, veterans who don't typically hand out praise to rookies just to be nice, are already calling him a natural leader. Offensive linemen, the guys who actually have to live or die by a quarterback's footwork and timing, are saying the operation already feels like it's rolling smoothly. 7 weeks. That's all it took to get those words out of people who don't usually say things like that this early. Now here's where the story gets genuinely interesting, because despite all of that momentum, the depth chart hasn't actually moved. Kirk Cousins is still QB1. Kirk Cousins was, by every account coming out of that building, the best quarterback on the field this spring. And I want to be completely fair here, because I think it's easy to get swept up in rookie hype and forget that part of the equation. Cousins didn't inherit that job. He didn't win it by default because he's the only veteran in the room. He earned it through performance, real performance, against real competition, in a building where coaches don't hand out compliments just to keep morale high. But here's what I think a lot of Raiders fans are underestimating right now. There are people inside that organization who are already bracing for Mendoza to make this an actual fight by the time training camp opens. Not next year, not mid-season if Cousins struggles. Day 1 of padded practices. That's not some fan on social media speculating. That's language coming from inside the building. And when insiders start floating timelines like that in June, before a single padded rep has even happened, it usually means somebody behind closed doors is seeing something the public hasn't fully caught up to yet. So what do we actually do with that information? I think there are really only 2 honest ways to read it. Either the Raiders are simply keeping their options technically open as a smart, low-cost insurance policy, the way every well-run organization should with a talented rookie on the roster. Or they're watching something happen on that practice field that's quietly turning what should be a formality into something resembling a real live quarterback competition. I'll be honest with you, I lean toward the second explanation, and here's my reasoning. Front offices don't typically let expectations like that slip out by accident. If the Raiders truly believed Cousins was locked in for 16 games no matter what, the messaging around this quarterback room would sound completely different. It would sound closed. It would sound finished. It would sound like a door that's already been shut and bolted. Instead, what we're hearing sounds like a door being deliberately propped open, like somebody upstairs wants flexibility just in case the kid keeps climbing at this pace. That's not nothing. That's a signal. And this is where I think Tom Brady's presence in that organization matters more than people are giving it credit for. Brady has spent years, both as a player and now in this front office role, preaching patience with young quarterbacks. Don't rush the kid. Let him earn it. Let the game come to him slowly, on its own timeline, without forcing anything. So if Brady himself is even remotely entertaining the idea of an accelerated path for Mendoza, that tells you something important about what he's personally witnessing in that building. Brady isn't a guy who hands out urgency casually. If urgency is creeping into the conversation around this kid, it's because the quarterback himself is forcing that conversation to happen. Let's shift over to Max Crosby for a second, because his situation this offseason actually ties directly into this story in a way people overlook. Earlier this year, this entire Raiders landscape could have looked dramatically different. A trade sending Crosby to Baltimore was actually agreed upon at one point. It fell apart. 3 months later, he's still in Las Vegas, still the heartbeat of that defense, still setting the daily standard at the facility that everyone else has to match. Now think about what that continuity means for a rookie quarterback trying to find his footing in a new locker room. Imagine if Crosby had actually left. Imagine Mendoza walking into a building that had just lost its emotional and competitive anchor, trying to establish himself in a locker room still grieving that loss. Instead, he's learning what professional standards look like from the same guy who never actually walked out the door. That stability matters more than people realize when you're talking about a rookie trying to build credibility fast. Now let's get into the part of this story that genuinely excites me the most, because I think it explains a lot about why Mendoza is progressing at the rate he is. The mentorship angle here is almost engineered, like the front office built it on purpose. Mendoza has openly talked about how much he's absorbed simply from watching Cousins run this exact offense in real games, real seasons, real pressure. And on top of that, he's been studying tape of Sam Darnold, another quarterback who ran through this very same scheme and found real success doing it. Stop and think about that for a second. A rookie quarterback walking into a building with two living, breathing examples of how to actually succeed in this specific system. That's not luck. That's not a happy accident of roster construction. That's a front office deliberately building an ecosystem around their young quarterback to shrink his learning curve as much as humanly possible. And from everything coming out of that building right now, he's taking full advantage of every bit of it. This is why I keep circling back to the same central idea every time I think about this situation. The real story here was never Cousins versus Mendoza. The real story is how fast that gap between them is shrinking. In May, Mendoza was clearly behind, and frankly, that was expected. Nobody walks into a brand new under-center offense in May and looks finished. By June, though, that gap had visibly tightened, and it wasn't fans saying it, it was the coaching staff saying it publicly. By the time training camp opens in late July, we're finally going to get padded practices, actual contact, actual game speed pressure. That's the moment this stops being theoretical and starts becoming something real that we can actually evaluate. And based on everything trickling out of Las Vegas right now, I don't get the sense that anyone inside that building is walking into camp with a settled mind. I think they're walking in the way you approach a genuine question you don't already know the answer to. So let me lay out 3 realistic ways I think this could play out, because I think it helps frame where this is actually headed, instead of just speculating wildly. Scenario 1, Mendoza simply takes the job through sheer performance once camp opens. Given the under-center progress we've already seen, and given the pace he's described in his own words, this honestly isn't far-fetched anymore. If it happens, I don't think it'll feel like a shock. It'll feel like the natural conclusion of a trend that's been building steadily since May. Scenario 2, Cousins holds the job into the regular season, but the competition stays alive far longer than your typical veteran versus rookie battle usually does. Every joint practice becomes a referendum. Every single preseason snap gets dissected by everyone watching. Honestly, I think this is probably the most likely outcome, and I don't think it's a bad one at all. Pressure tends to breed readiness, not stunt it. Scenario 3. Cousins starts the season clearly as the guy, plays well, and the transition happens on a more traditional rookie timeline, sometime in the back half of the year. Considering how consistently the front office has talked about patience all offseason, this remains very plausible too. Here's the thing though, none of these three outcomes are actually bad for the Raiders. That's the part I keep coming back to. This isn't a quarterback room with a problem sitting in the middle of it. This is a quarterback room sitting on options, and options are something this particular franchise hasn't had in a long time. Now let's talk about the fans for a second, because I've watched this exact pattern play out before with other teams, and it's happening again here in real time. People are already picking sides. Team Cousins, Team Mendoza. I understand the instinct, genuinely, because that's how sports fandom works. But look at what's actually unfolding underneath the surface here. A respected veteran is playing well and mentoring the future at the exact same time. A rookie is absorbing information at a rate that's drawing legitimate praise from his own coaching staff. A defensive anchor in Crosby never actually left when it looked like he might. A Hall of Fame mind in Brady is shaping the bigger picture from above the field level. These aren't competing storylines pulling against each other. These are individual pieces of the same machine, all moving in the same direction at once. If Cousins keeps playing well, Mendoza benefits from real, live game tape and a much smoother runway into the league. If Mendoza keeps pushing Cousins throughout camp, Cousins benefits from genuine competition, sharpening his own focus and performance. Either direction this goes, the Raiders come out ahead. That's what an actually healthy quarterback room looks like in practice. I think a lot of fans have simply forgotten what that feels like, because it's been a while since this franchise had one. So where does that leave things as training camp approaches? Honestly, right where this organization probably wants to be. Not desperate, not rushed into a decision, not locked into a single predetermined outcome before the pads even go on for the first time. Just patient, with a rookie quarterback who keeps shrinking the gap week after week, and a front office that seems increasingly comfortable letting that gap close naturally, on its own terms, without forcing anything prematurely. Years from now, nobody's going to remember the exact wording of a quote from a June press conference. What people will remember is whether this organization got the development right. And right now, every report coming out of that Henderson facility is saying the same basic thing in slightly different language. They're getting it right, not because of one isolated practice, not because of one quote that went viral for a day, because of 7 consecutive weeks of a rookie quarterback proving rep by rep, day by day, that a gap everyone assumed would take years to close might actually only take months. Now I want to go one layer deeper, because there's a detail here I don't think has fully landed with people yet. And it's the kind of thing that tells you a lot about who this kid actually is, away from football entirely. When Indiana received their White House invitation to celebrate their national championship season, Mendoza didn't go. Sit with that for a second. A genuinely historic invitation, tied to arguably the single biggest achievement of his entire college career, and he chose to stay behind in Las Vegas instead. Why? Because he didn't want to miss a rookie practice. In his own words, he felt like skipping it wouldn't be a good look. Now, plenty of guys in his exact position would have gone, and honestly, nobody would have blamed them for it. It was a once-in-a-lifetime moment attached to a truly historic season, but he picked the unglamorous version of leadership instead. Show up, put in the work, let the celebration wait for him. That decision didn't generate highlight reels the way a touchdown throw would, but that's exactly the kind of quiet decision that shapes how a veteran locker room starts to view a young player long before he's earned anything on the field. Teammates notice things like that far more than fans ever will. It's a quiet signal, sure, but inside that building, every single day, it's an incredibly loud one. I want to circle back to Cousins for a moment too, because I don't want any of this to come across like the veteran is simply keeping the seat warm. That's not accurate, and frankly, it's not fair to him. Cousins was genuinely the best quarterback on that field this spring. And that's not some participation trophy talking point. That's measurable, real performance against legitimate NFL caliber competition in live practice settings. He's also been refreshingly candid about not wanting to overstate his own role in Mendoza's development. When reporters tried labeling him as some kind of mentor figure, Cousins actually pushed back a little, calling it a bit of a stretch. And honestly, I think that's a healthy response from him. It tells you he's not trying to play some grandfatherly veteran character for the cameras. He's trying to win football games. He's treating this like the real competition it actually is, because that's exactly what it is. And that competitive tension is genuinely good for both of them. A veteran who's coasting through the spring doesn't push a rookie to develop faster. A veteran who's still locked in, still sharp, still legitimately fighting to keep his job, forces that rookie to climb just to keep pace with him. That kind of friction tends to produce real growth in a way that comfort simply can't. If Cousins were just handing this job over without a fight, Mendoza's development curve might actually slow down instead of accelerating. Real competition has a way of speeding things up that patience alone never could. I also think it's worth bringing up Aiden O'Connell here, because there's a third quarterback sitting in this room, and his presence changes the entire texture of training camp more than people give it credit for. A three-man quarterback competition creates an environment where every single rep has to be earned, where nobody ever fully settles in or gets comfortable. That kind of pressure tends to expose pretenders quickly, but it also tends to fast-track the guys who are genuinely built for this level. And from everything we've seen so far, Mendoza appears to be handling that pressure extremely well enough that people inside the building keep reaching for the word leader to describe a rookie who hasn't taken a single meaningful regular season snap yet. I also want to push back on a narrative I keep seeing floated around. This idea that the Raiders are simply sitting back and waiting to see what happens. I don't think that's an accurate read at all, because waiting implies passivity, and nothing about this approach has felt passive to me. Those nightly walkthroughs at the team hotel weren't passive. Attacking the under-center weakness immediately after the draft, before camp even started, wasn't passive. Deliberately surrounding Mendoza with two working examples of this exact offense, in Cousins live and Darnold on tape, wasn't passive either. This isn't a franchise sitting back and hoping things sort themselves out organically. This is a coaching staff actively engineering the fastest realistic path to readiness, all while publicly preaching patience to the outside world. Those two approaches aren't contradictory. Push hard behind closed doors. Stay calm in front of the cameras. Let the actual results do the talking, instead of a forced public timeline. There's also something genuinely human in how Mendoza has talked about this entire process that I think deserves attention. He's admitted that the sheer volume of information has felt like a fire hose at times. That's an honest admission, and most rookies wouldn't say something like that publicly. Out of fear, it makes them look unprepared. But it actually tells you something important about him. He's not pretending this transition has been effortless, and in the same breath, he's describing exactly how he's attacking the difficulty. Extra walkthroughs, extra film sessions, extra reps with his offensive line before the sun's even fully up some mornings. That combination, openly acknowledging how hard something is while actively grinding through it anyway, tends to be one of the strongest indicators of how a player will handle real adversity once the games actually start counting for something. So when people ask me whether Mendoza is ready right now, I genuinely think that's the wrong question to be asking at this stage. The better question is whether he's building the right habits to become ready on an accelerated timeline. And from every report coming out of that building, the answer keeps pointing in the same direction. Zooming all the way out, I think this is bigger than one quarterback battle in one specific quarterback room. This is about a franchise actively trying to break a cycle that's haunted it for years. The Raiders haven't had real stability at the quarterback position in a long time. Plenty of temporary fixes, plenty of bridge seasons that everyone quietly knew were never built to last. That cycle wears a fan base down. It breeds the kind of instinctive skepticism where you brace for disappointment before anything's even gone wrong yet, simply because you've been burned enough times before. I understand why some fans are still hesitant to fully buy into this. Years of false starts will do that to anyone who's paid attention. But I genuinely encourage people to look at the actual structure being built around this situation, instead of just the headlines. A defensive anchor in Crosby, who stayed when he very easily could have left. A Hall of Fame influence in Brady shaping decisions from above the day-to-day grind. A genuinely competitive veteran in Cousins, who isn't simply gifting anything to anyone. A rookie who already sounds like a leader before he's played a single snap that actually counts. None of that guarantees championships, because nothing in this sport ever guarantees that. But it does suggest something that's been missing in Las Vegas for a long time now. An actual plan that's being followed in practice, instead of one that just sounds good behind a podium. So as July gets closer and pads finally go on for real, I'd encourage you to watch this competition a little differently than your standard quarterback battle. Don't just track who wins individual reps in camp. Track how that gap keeps moving week to week. Pay attention to the specific language coaches use after each practice, because that's usually where the real story hides before it ever becomes an official headline. If the pattern from these last 7 weeks holds up under padded, live, full-speed football, that gap is going to keep closing in ways that catch people off guard if they're only checking in occasionally. And if it closes fast enough, training camp isn't just going to decide who trots out for the Week 1 opener. It might end up deciding what the next decade of Raiders football actually looks like. That's the part genuinely worth paying attention to here. Not the headline of who wins one isolated practice rep, but the steady current running underneath all of it. The one that's been quietly building since the very first day of OTAs, pointing in the exact same direction every single week since. Forward.